So as we discussed in the last video, Marvel What If Season 3 was off to an okay start. In my opinion, one winner and one loser. Let's look at episodes 3, 4, and 5. The middle of Season 3, before we get into the 3 episodes that appear to be the series finale. Alright, episode 3, What If the Red Guardian Stopped the Winter Soldier? Another huge winner. First of all, the premise, genius. What if these two characters, who existed around the same time and worked for the same government, kind of. It's unclear exactly who Bucky was working for at what times, but at least at some point was working for the Russians. What if these two characters, who have a lot of Marvel history and have never met before, met? Now, we're going to see these characters actually meet in Thunderbolt, and they're going to have little conversations that I'm sure will be kind of similar to what they're talking about here. But this one, very smartly, centered around a very specific moment for the Winter Soldier that was pivotal for him, and one that Red Guardian should have kind of been interested in. So this very natural what if setup already puts this episode on really sure footing. But then, what I think really works is these characters. Now, I said in the episodes 1 and 2 video, that in the first episode, Red Guardian kind of got on my nerves. And I will stand by that. I don't think he fully worked there. I think what I've realized, especially after seeing these episodes together, 1 and then 3, is that either you need no Red Guardian or a lot of Red Guardian. A little bit of Red Guardian doesn't work. He needs to be fully overdoing it. You need to be hearing him do the same monologue with the same themes over and over again, to the point where you are with those other characters just being bored to tears and wanting to throw him out of the car. But at the same time, seeing all this play out in front of him and seeing how his values that he is constantly espousing change the way he feels about everything. Like, we didn't get much of that in the Black Widow movie, because in Black Widow we find a Red Guardian who is already in prison, already over the hill. He's not going to get another chance. But here, he's in his prime, but he is also still the same character. He's still that Alexei who doesn't trust power, who's really into Lenin and communism and all of that. I also think the way they chose to animate Alexei and Bucky was great. They gave Alexei so much personality. His face was doing so much acting, like in that scene where he's trying to talk his way out of the conversation with the cop, who we will get to. Watching him squirm is so funny. It's so true to how David Harbour would act that character, but it feels like it's taking full advantage of cartoons and what you can do with the silly face. Also, I don't know who is in charge of making him run the way that he ran in this episode, that it is so goofy and weird. I'm pretty sure we've never seen him run like that in the movies, but it works so well here. In contrast to a character like Bucky, who's very cool, very collected, this super soldier who's always running the way you would expect a super soldier to run, you have this goofy cartoon character next to him who is the opposite of that. Adding these two as a foil was great. Also, taking the differences in their relationship, in the way they operated at that time. Alexei being a character of ideals, and Bucky being a character of practicality and results. Having those two personalities clash sets up set pieces where the character's not only trying to escape, but one is trying to stop the other from killing everybody around them. It is the exact kind of push and pull that makes this stuff work. I also think, and I mentioned this in the episode 1 video, I thought it was weird how they chose to animate Bucky in that episode. Specifically, they gave him this really long neck. It doesn't fully not look like him, but if you saw that character from a distance, it wouldn't automatically read as Bucky. I think this episode really lent into A, the Winter Soldier, which is a more iconic look for him, but B, the fact that he is Sebastian Stan, a handsome guy who can get by on charm sometimes. I love that. Now, the other connections, because obviously, Bucky, Red Guardian, that's good. This is enough to make an episode fun, having them go on some sort of mission, and then you get other characters that are Red Room characters like Dreykov. Sure. Putting Bill Foster in this episode, genius, because again, S.H.I.E.L.D. agent at the time, sort of working cases like this, and why not doing Goliath stuff? Using What If as the opportunity to showcase these other characters who do cool things but never got to be in the spotlight. Perfect. Also, that was interesting. America Ferrera was in this episode. She was not playing an established MCU character. It seems like there's going to be at least 1 or 2 other ones of those where you're like, that's an actor who I know, but that is not someone that is playing a character that is like a setup or anything. It's just like they got them for the What If episode. That's fun. I do think her voice is distinct enough that people would recognize it, and having this fight between a giant man, or a Goliath in this case, and these two guys who aren't trying to kill him, but are trying to stop him using their Red Guardian training and stuff, fantastic. I think all the action scenes in this episode were great. The one-on-one fights were fun. Every time Red Guardian and Winter Soldier took out a room full of goons, it was always great. And then last but definitely not least, I absolutely love the inclusion of Obadiah Stane. Looks like this character was voiced by an actor named Kif Vanderheuvel. There's no way I'm pronouncing that right, but that's what we're going with. He was actually the voice of Obadiah in the season 1 episode with Killmonger. Even I, someone who knows all this stuff inside and out, while watching this episode, spent a lot of time going, if the Rook is a guy I'm supposed to know, who could that be? I thought maybe Castle. Like, it didn't make sense that this would be the Punisher, especially considering there was no indication that he was ever going to be in this. But I think as a callback to how this character kind of worked in the movies, but way more works in the comics, Obadiah as Rook makes perfect sense. First of all, for people that don't know, Obadiah Ironmonger in the books is way more chess-themed than he has been in the movies. He has henchmen that he calls chessmen. He's always talking about being smart and playing chess. I believe he plays chess a little bit in Iron Man 1, but obviously that's the only time we see him, so that's the only time he can play chess. But very smart that he is the chess piece here. And then we have this new bit of lore that I don't think we had ever really known. I'm sure if you ask someone like, how did the Winter Soldier know where to find Tony Stark? And he had to come up with an answer. Obadiah Stane told them as part of a power play. That makes sense. But that had never been confirmed, and I didn't think that's something we'd ever check back in on. So I love how we were able to use this episode to add that bit of lore. And even if that isn't something that's official, that's something we could kind of think of. That's fun. Also, love the idea of putting the Red Guardian against a capitalist pig. I think that's very funny. Just overall, I cannot say enough good things about this episode. It was funny, it had action, it had heart, it had a lot of heart. It had enough heart that I'm like, are these two guys gonna get together? And I'm not one of those people that sees any two male friendships and goes, ooh, this is a couple, I mean, this is what they're going for. However, I cannot deny while watching this episode that it kind of felt like maybe some sparks were flying. I think one thing we kind of know about What If, something that I think is definitely true here and was true of other episodes from the past, specifically the Iron Man on Sakaar episode, What If may not be the best when it comes to making like a human being walk. It may not do that supernaturally. Car chases and racing look great, and they should focus on that more. More episodes of people driving around in cars because it looks cool. I also think Lawrence Fishburne as Bill Foster was great. The decision to have him be kind of like the Nick Fury, or at least a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. who will recruit a guy like Red Guardian to join the Avengers, I think is super fun. So yeah, I think episode 3 is the complete winner. A very fun, very simple what if idea executed brilliantly. Then we've got episode 4, What If Howard the Duck Got Hitched? I gotta say, this is definitely gonna go down as one of my favorite episodes of What If. And I know there are plenty of people who don't like it, because it's dumb. But it's a good kind of dumb. At least for me. A dumb I can enjoy. A dumb that feels very reminiscent of other comics Howard the Duck has been in. And a dumb that is clearly written by fans of this show who want to do fun things. So right off the bat, Seth Green, Kat Dennings, good. I like them a lot. I'm happy that Seth Green gets a whole episode to just do Howard the Duck. We've had a lot of Howard the Duck showing up in Guardians movies and then getting some lines, and then he had more to say in Party Thor, and then he had more to say in the Nebula is Nova Corps episode. But this is easily the most Howard the Duck we've seen and the most we've heard Seth Green be Howard the Duck, and I think he has this character down. And I think this episode's writing team of Brian Andrews, Matthew Chauncey, and Ryan Little have a very specific voice for Howard that fits in very naturally with Seth Green's portrayal with Howard the Duck in comics and what we have seen of Howard the Duck in the MCU. As far as Kat Dennings as Darcy, she's been quite a few of these. I never loved her in Thor, but I liked her in WandaVision. I think she was solid here. She's definitely an actor with more experience in comedy, so I think she's good at acting and reacting in this kind of setting in a way that doesn't feel like we're injecting a comedy character into the scenes that are serious in Thor. Instead, she feels right at home in this kind of narrative. I also love that Howard the Duck and Darcy are both kind of idiots. You could obviously play this relationship where Howard is the degenerate gambler who's kind of an idiot, has a little bit of street smarts, but overall makes a lot of mistakes, and Darcy is the opposite of that. She is analytical, she always makes the right decisions, she protects Howard, but that's not the case here. They're both kind of dumb, and they're both kind of smart. It makes it way more fun to watch these guys jump around. Overall, I think this premise of taking the Party Thor episode and expanding it a little bit, but specifically taking this idea of aliens came to Earth and they were nice and fun and everybody liked them, and then Earth became part of space, so all the Earth villains got involved in space stuff and all the space villains got involved in Earth stuff. And that changed a lot of their personalities, some in a more extreme comedy way, but in others it's like, yeah, no, Caecilius would probably try to find other magical stuff, other relics, bump into the Grandmaster, try to sacrifice things to Dormammu. Like, that totally makes sense for that character. The Grandmaster is one of those characters who doesn't want to take over the Earth, he just wants to have fun parties, so if he showed up on Earth, he would have fun parties on Earth, make an industry out of that, and be very popular. I also like how the writers took the idea of merging space and Earth characters, and then added a second premise onto that that felt very reasonable in this universe, and also made for a fun watch, which is, let's give all the one-off villains a little bit more spotlight. We had appearances from Grandmaster, Caecilius, Dormammu, Malekith the Accursed, Zeus, Laufey, and the Black Order. I think some of those were played by the actors who had played them originally. The speaking members of the Black Order, basically just Ebony Maw, that was the original voice actor. Thanos, the original voice actor. Loki, original voice actor. But then all those other guys were played by impersonators, and I think they all did a pretty good job. They didn't all sound exactly like their actors. I do think the Grandmaster specifically was very good. He managed to do a version of Jeff Goldblum where I was pretty sure listening to it, I was like, this is not Jeff Goldblum. But every so often I went, but that really sounds like Jeff Goldblum, though. I think the same can be said for Zeus and Malekith. But I think the voice acting in this episode was really good. And I'll also say the other stars of this episode that I thought were great were Nick Fury and Agent Coulson. And this was Sam Jackson and Clark Gregg. Sam Jackson was making so many fun choices. Obviously, Fury out as a catchphrase, fun. I loved every time he pronounced the full last name, the Duck, because it always kind of fell out of his mouth, but the end, that cut was always so strong. Showed a great level of both contempt for them, but also taking the idea of what was going on seriously. Speaking of taking things seriously, I've seen people on the internet complain about the episode being about the baby being born during the convergence, and it's like, that makes this baby very special and all prophecies and stuff like that. But when we saw the convergence in Thor 2, there were no babies born that turned into super people, or at least if there were, we never found out about them. And I've seen people kind of CinemaSins ding that as a hit against this episode. To what I would say, A, probably not a lot of human-bird hybrids. Maybe it only works if it's that. And then B, because Thor interrupted the convergence, we didn't have a full convergence. So maybe if we did have a full convergence that came and went, we would have gotten a duck baby. We'll never know. Some other smaller things. I fully agree with Darcy that nothing good ever happens on a cruise. I also love the implication that Howard the Duck did a lot of crimes, and every time someone surprises him, he thinks that's someone coming to arrest or serve him. A character like that is very funny to me. Speaking of that, I love the line, recovering gambling addict, I got the chip, pulls out a casino chip, that's the wrong chip. The delivery was so fast. There were very few jokes that it felt like this episode was like waiting for you to applaud. It actually felt like the episode trusted you to both be paying attention and maybe go back and find new stuff to enjoy. Plenty of comedy gets better on the rewatch, and I'll just say personally, watching this episode the second time, plenty of fun reactions and little jokes that I missed. The funniest overall line has to be, did you say magical kid? The idea that Howard and Darcy just keep running into villains and that gets escalated, and then that joke gets turned on its head when villains show up but they're not looking for the baby, but then they will be. I also like the song. I wish that song was not in the movie Fall Guy so much. I feel like that plays at least like 3 times in the movie Fall Guy, so much so that I got a little bit tired of it. If that had not been used so much in a major movie this year, I think this would have been a really fun pull for this episode, and I think it was used about the right amount. And overall, I think this episode really succeeds because these characters are likable, they are weird, the episode is weird immediately, there's no like, oh, can they get pregnant? What's gonna happen? Oh, that's a lot of drama. You could have an episode where Darcy finds out she's pregnant, and that's the episode because that is a funny premise. But instead, they moved immediately past that in a way that tells me, the audience member, like, listen, don't take this too seriously, just have fun. But there are emotional stakes of a pair of new parents who seem to love each other, trying to get their baby back, and fighting against 2 full phases of MCU villains. So it didn't just feel hollow. I also think, kind of like speculation for future episodes, we may see that bird character, Birdie, again. So this episode will actually end up being important. But even if it wasn't, even if nothing ever came from it, which I am fine with, and I think that's how these should go a lot of the time, unless, like in this episode, they have a fun idea for a spinoff from a previous episode. But overall, just as an episode, What If Howard the Duck Got Hitched, I think is the funniest thing What If has produced. It may not be the best individual episode of What If, but I had so much fun with it, I could watch a whole Howard the Duck series. And maybe this is testing the waters to see if that's something we're going to do. And then episode 5, What If the Emergence Destroyed the Earth? I don't think this episode was terrible, and I do admire some of the ambition of this episode, having a fully destroyed Earth, bringing back a character like Mysterio, who we've never expected to see in another MCU thing, and giving him a pretty unusual, but I think fitting enough villain role. And some of the action, especially the White Vision just messing people up action, is kind of fun to watch. I feel like I can't help but be a little bummed that this episode did not have any Eternals in it, considering it was about the emergence, and I understand that that's not really what it was about, but when I saw another episode in the schedule that had emergence in the title, I was pretty excited. I think Dominique Thorne was pretty good as Riri. Voice acting didn't feel wooden or anything like that. It's always good to see Tessa Thompson Valkyrie again. And apparently the blonde lady was actually Emily Van Camp as Sharon Carter. But I think for me, this episode just didn't have an interesting enough hook. In What If, we've already seen worlds that were destroyed. We've already seen bands of survivors fighting an Ultron kind of robot. We've already seen a sorcerer give everybody magic armor so they could fight an Ultron-y robot. I don't think the pacing here was bad. I actually think it moved at a clip that I didn't mind. But I guess maybe the problem is, with me, Ironheart is not a character who I understand well enough to be interested in seeing in this situation. I guess what I mean is, this performance does not feel very different from a traditional Ironheart performance, considering you've only seen one of those in Wakanda Forever. I think if this had come out after her show, this maybe would have hit a little harder, but because we don't know that much about Riri besides that she likes to build things and has that usual Marvel quippy, you can't even grill a hamburger in 7.5 minutes, which I don't mind, but I guess this character isn't sketched out enough or based on a familiar enough archetype that seeing him in this situation is interesting. Like, I guess if you compare this to some of the other episodes from this season that I think have been very successful, Agatha Going to Hollywood and Red Guardian and Winter Soldier, look at a character like the Red Guardian or a character like Agatha, and they feel very distinct from pretty much every other character in that universe. And I don't think it matters, for me at least, whether that character is one I particularly enjoy, right? Like, Red Guardian is kind of annoying, but he's a specific enough kind of annoying that he can be fun if you pair him with the right character. But I think Riri, as of now, besides the car thing, which I think is interesting, right? She's a gearhead, similar to how Iron Man was in the first couple of movies, but we didn't really get into any of that here. And because we didn't get any of that, she felt like just any character in a post-apocalypse situation who is good with machines. I also think one of the things that has made season 3 so successful that this didn't really do was playing with specific heroes who have relationships or could have relationships. Red Guardian and Winter Soldier are an interesting pairing because of their dynamic, but also because they're from the same place from the same time and they've never met, or at least they haven't up until the Thunderbolts movie, but they didn't meet then back in the past. Agatha and Kingo, very theatrical characters that have lived for a long time, and Howard the Duck and Darcy, characters both played by actors from sitcoms, put in a very sitcom-y episode. I don't know what the connection is, if any, between Riri, Wong, Okoye, Valkyrie, and Ying Nan. And because of that, it kind of felt like a generic team where, say what you will about the season 1 finale that had similar vibes to this one, at least those characters were more distinct. Like, Ying Nan could have been any character. You totally could have swapped her in with the Wasp, or Sharon Carter, or Joaquin Torres, or any of the other so far somewhat thinly written characters in the MCU that are good guys and at least a little bit older than Riri. Like, I could see a world where maybe the thing connecting all of these characters is they don't really use technology much. Though I wouldn't say that's true for Okoye necessarily, especially after Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And Valkyrie, it's like, how much technology is the big boat thing? That feels like it's technology. I only say the technology thing because it's like, well, if Quentin Beck maybe can control all of that, then it's like, if these are the only guys left, that's like a pitch, I guess. But I'm thinking like, okay, let's say we've decided this has to be Riri Williams. That's part of the episode's pitch, fine. And Quentin Beck has to be the bad guy. What connects those characters, and why is it interesting to see them fight each other? They're both characters, I guess, that are playing with the legacy of Iron Man. He's a Stark employee who wants to use Iron Man stuff against everybody, and she's a fan of Iron Man's who wants to build her own Iron Man stuff. That's sort of a pitch. Like, honestly, what this is kind of sounding like is Armor Wars. And then if that's the case, I think you want to populate the Resistance team with some of the Iron Man supporting characters. This would be like War Machine, Happy, maybe Agent Coulson. You could even throw Spider-Man in there. These could be characters that knew Iron Man, that are like, listen, he's dead, he can't help us, but you seem like you've got it. You can do this. So we want to help you. And maybe over the course of the episode, she could learn a lesson that Tony learned from these guys. You know, I think the Ying Nan role could go to Pepper in that scenario, especially because it doesn't seem like any of those characters are going to show up in the Ironheart show. I just think this episode lacked focus. Like, I think the way that you could tell that maybe this one didn't work is you can take a line said by Ying Nan or Okoye, that is just them talking to Riri Williams. And you can probably take most of the things Riri said and show just that line to someone or just the exchange between those two characters and ask them, which two characters is this going to be? Anybody in the Marvel Universe, does this stick out as anybody specific? Versus something like the Red Guardian Winter Soldier episode. Those two characters are written to do that. Agatha and Kingo. And Kingo is not the most fully realized character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but definitely Agatha. Like, you see an Agatha line with that vibe, and you know what you're watching. I think she does have a voice. We've seen her in Shang-Chi, where we know what she sounds like, what she teaches Shang-Chi about, like, focus and family. So it's weird that she'd bring any of those lessons to this movie, but also this character didn't sound like her in an interesting way. And I'll say for the Okoye, I am looking at the credits, so I know that Dora Milaje was Okoye. But you could convince me that was Ao or one of the other Dora Milaje that we've seen in these movies and shows. It's especially kind of weird because Okoye and Riri Williams are characters that in the MCU know each other. And in the MCU, we know what a scene with both of them in it looks like. Okoye takes everything very seriously. Riri Williams does not. They clash over that. So it's weird that they didn't do any of that here or a take on any of that. I think the action in this episode looked quite good. I really liked the look of Mysterio, especially this strange old man Mysterio, played by apparently Alejandro Saab, which I didn't want to bring it up because obviously it's not Jake Gyllenhaal, except he had a lot of really good Jake Gyllenhaal-isms in there. Enough that, like with Grandmaster, I could tell this wasn't Jake Gyllenhaal, but every so often, I think you could fool somebody. And I did like the idea, and this has been pointed out to me by Antonio from the book club, that in this episode, Riri Williams kind of becomes Superior Iron Man by getting the white suit that shows some of her face and gives her incredible nano powers. Like, there's not much to that besides just she kind of is that, and that's kind of cool. That feels like more of an Easter egg than an actual, like, plot point, but as an Easter egg, I enjoyed it. And this is another one of those episodes where the Watcher doesn't want to act, but then he does, and he breaks his oath. I feel like we've seen that a couple times now. If this was the first time that it happened, I would think this is interesting. But because this has happened so many times, the tension of will he react in this moment didn't really go anywhere for me. However, I do like the introduction of the other three Watchers. Apparently their names are the Incarnate, the Executioner, and the Eminent, who is apparently voiced by Jason Isaacs, who people will know from a lot of things, but as far as I'm concerned, will always be General Zhukov from Death of Stalin. But I think all of that fun stuff will play out over the next couple of episodes, so besides the tease here, there wasn't a lot to sink your teeth into. Also, again, and I understand this is a kid's show, when a character is no longer able to see through illusions, the fact that they take what another character is saying at face value, especially when we're supposed to assume that this character is pretty smart, and they turn out to be an illusion. I'm not saying she has to figure out all of it, but I do think that turn felt painfully obvious. So yeah, definitely not the worst episode, but one I doubt I'll come back to, and doubt I'll think about again at the end of the season. And because this season, for me at least, has been so strong, this one so far might be the least interesting. If I had to rank them, which I don't, but I will, right now, episode 5 is at the bottom. Mech Avengers, number 4. Agatha Kingo, number 3. Very close with Red Guardian Winter Soldier, number 2. And then Howard the Duck and Darcy, number 1. I just think it's such a dumb, funny episode that I couldn't help but enjoy it. But now we've got the last 3, 1872, and then 2 just about the Watcher. Big finale for this whole series. I'm very excited. We will do at least one other video for those 3 episodes, then maybe some sort of what if retrospective afterwards. But before any of that, I want to talk to you about this video's sponsor, Nebula. You know Nebula, it is a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of YouTubers helped to create. It focuses on giving the creators more power to make the cool stuff that you guys already like and giving you guys a better experience for watching it. That means all my videos go up ad-free. Some of them are early. The Nando V Movies videos are early. The Nando Cut videos are like a little early, but they're not as early because they're like a thing that happened yesterday usually. We curate different video lists based on what people are talking about. So if you're watching that new Dune show, for example, and you want to watch some videos about Dune, we've got a bunch of those. We make that really easy to find. You can just watch that. We also have Nebula Originals. So these are all kinds of things. We've got like a pro shoot of a play by Abigail Thorne. Patrick Willems has made a Christmas special. His full-length feature film about an evil coconut. He's got a new short film coming out with a cast full of actors like Zach Cherry, who fans of this channel, I mean, you know him from so many things. Perhaps he has been in Severance, you love Severance, Fallout, but I mean, realistically, a good portion of you know him as the guy who tells Spider-Man to do a flip, or the guy who is taping the Shang-Chi fight. But either way, he is in this, and that is something you can only watch on Nebula. Tom Nichols just made a documentary about gerontocracy, about how boomers have changed the world and government, and is it good, or is it even really a thing? A subject that has only gotten more relevant since this documentary came out. We have so many other cool things I think you guys are going to love. You'll find out about them soon. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal at $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. It's a great deal. Check it out. Go to go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut. Use the code TheNandoCut at checkout. I guarantee you'll find something cool you're going to like. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.